You might win, so then people say like, we're winning, so it's no problem. But I would say as soon as you start losing, then you're out. So if you want to have a consistent performance and environment where you develop, I think it's the best way is to make sure you have the holistic perspective and winning through that, even if it takes longer time, because then you can handle a bad season much better than if you need to buy 15 new players and just put a lot of pressure on them. How can you handle pressure? How can you handle a full stadium at Wembley, and how can you handle a small stadium when it's not too many people if they want to score a goal and so on? So work on being present here and now, listen to me or listen to you when we have a talk, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm adding yoga once a week. So I think, working with breathing, make sure you can actually stay connected to the present is very important. And I speak about that every day in a session, in a meeting, that you need to focus on what I'm saying right now because we need to stay here with it, right?
If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button down below. The bigger the channel, the bigger the guests, and the bigger the guests, the better the production, better entertainment for you to explore. So it's free to do. Click the subscribe button down below and enjoy the podcast.
I want to begin by exploring how your summer's been. Had a bit of a time to reflect upon your FA Cup run last year. How's the summer been for you in terms of that implementation going forward into the new season?
Well, I think, when you move to a new country and you work quite hard for the whole year and you end up at Wembley in the end and trying to step back and have a reflection of it, it's a few weeks before you land in that. And when you did that, we were, basically just relaxing at home in London, I felt like it was a good year with reaching the Wembley. It was a good year for this team to do what we did and finish top 6. And then you had some vacation and reloading, and then you quite soon want to restart and make sure we take the next step in this journey. So you're never too happy when you have a quite good season. It's always, okay, what should we do now to improve, right? So the summer's been a lot of reflection and also make sure we take steps to this season.
And in terms of obviously that summer period, maybe taking yourself away from the footballing pitch to reflect, like you said, what kind of things do you do during that process to really define maybe your ambitions going forward? Is there anything that you do to help you within that moment?
Yeah, I'm kind of a guy who want to get energy by giving energy. So when I'm in the football, I do that. So the first thing I did was actually to fly to Uganda, to Africa. I'm running an academy there where I support a school with equipment and everything. So my kids were still in school there in England. So I collected like 5 bags with boots and just flew to Uganda. I was there a few days embracing women's football and had a few trainings and got a lot of energy from that. And then we went to Sweden 1 week with my family and meeting old friends. And then I went to Greece and had some training and relaxing time with my family. So it's kind of, I like to travel. I like to be training. I like to meet people. So that's how I recharge, basically.
Does that kind of put things into perspective a little bit when you go to Uganda and you see what the development of the country and football is like there, and obviously returning back to obviously Tottenham Hotspur, a massive football club? Does it kind of make you realise the position that you're in?
Yeah, when I have a session here at the Hotspur where it's like the best grass field ever, and then you go and have a training at the really, really poor grass field or basically sand, and yeah, you kind of realize that everything is different in life and in the world, and you kind of need to find ways to appreciate what you have and also support and help out where you can as well. So it's my way to have a work-life balance and also make sure I do something more than just next game.
Yeah. You mentioned Sweden then, so if I bring you back to the beginnings of your journey, how did football and coaching become a passion for you? Is there any moment in terms of your journey that stick out in memory?
Yeah, I think I had to go with the coaching because my playing career was not working out. So I was a huge talent. I was good. I was professional since I was 16. I was playing in the best team in Sweden and couldn't really handle my talent. I couldn't really handle the coaches. I couldn't really use my talent. So after a while, I realized that all my friends were playing abroad and was still in the second division, in and out of the starting 11, and didn't like my coaches. So kind of, okay, I love football. I want to stay in football. How do I make it work? And it was, okay, I probably need to rethink and become a coach. So I was only 23 when I was a playing coach in Division 3 in Sweden. Meanwhile, I was also taking this Master of Education, so I'm a teacher as well. So I thought it was a good mixture to make sure I have a plan if I don't nail it as a coach, but also it's a very good education to have when you're a coach, because you're kind of having this university background as well, and you can reach the players in different ways.
And in terms of, you mentioned then you had friends that were moving away from Sweden. Is that always the incentive in terms of the football development there at Sweden to maybe learn your lessons, get your education, and then move away? Was that always the thought process for you?
Not from the beginning. I'm coming from a family with no education. Parents just, my mom didn't even work, my dad worked, but they didn't really have an education. But my bigger brother was a really good footballer, so he was playing in Italy and Turkey and, all over the place. And some of my best friends went abroad and played in Italy and England. So it was tricky for me to adapt to that, because I also want to do that. And then I didn't really have a history of educated people around me, but my wife had, and my girlfriend at that time, so she kind of pushed me into the university. And I think that was the key for me to understand how you can take control of your destiny, basically. So the university helped me a lot to grow as a person, and I think that was the key for me to become a good coach. So even if I were becoming a coach without that, I don't think I reached this far, because what you're learning at the university and meeting other people was very important to me, because I came from.
Do you feel like that was maybe a bit of an epiphany for you in terms of that element of education? And you mentioned that in terms of your previous playing career. Did you feel like maybe if you had those skills earlier, that might be different in terms of how you learn about certain aspects of the game? Yeah,
I mean, in one way, I kind of always looked for a mentor, to guide you through life. And my parents were not that kind of mentors. They drove me to the training ground and then supported me in their way. But I didn't really have anyone who can guide me in those years. So I was learning by doing, and basically learning by doing mistakes. Reflect on that. So if I had a different support, I would probably been a better footballer. I would probably, have more success in one way. But on the other hand, I was having this journey instead. So I don't regret it. I actually feel like, okay, there was a destiny for me to make sure I become a good coach. And now I'm living my dream and develop all the time. And through this university studies and everything, I'm also got in touch with gender equity, which is probably the way I ended up in women's football. So now feels like I'm driving a bigger picture than just winning the next game. I'm actually doing something for women's sport, for the society, for the next generation. And for me, it's more important than just 4-3-3 and high press. So in one way, yeah, if I had the help, that would help me for my playing career. But on the other hand, I feel like I'm very much where I want to be. Enjoy it.
We'll talk about, obviously, how you got into the women's game, but just on that, I'm interested on maybe those values that you had. You said then it's more important than just the 4-3-3 or the different formations or winning football. Where do you think that comes from, those values that you hold in terms of developing the people around you and that socialization element? Is there anything you can put your finger on?
Yeah, I mean, I was basically so less interested in women's sport before I went to the university, because I was a normal footballer guy, in the normal locker room talk and always focusing on the men's sport, right? So it was when I just had an essay at the university. You need to do something, you need to check something. And then I was actually checking why is boys getting better grade than girls in PE in school, but the girls getting better grades in all other subjects, but not that. So I just started to do that gender perspective on this essay, and then I just thought it was so unfair that the girls get worse grades just because they actually competed against the boys with fitness and not actually how good they were. So it started there, right? So I got some good inspiration how you should act, how you should say, how you shouldn't use the female word in a negative meaning and so on. So I brought that into the classroom. I had it in my classes, tried to teach the youth that you shouldn't neglect women, you shouldn't speak about them in a bad way just to make sure they are weaker or something like that. And then when I got twins, it basically took another step, because I have a boy and a son. I had a daughter and a son, right? So when you grow up with twins and they actually play football, they actually perform, and then you realize that my son gets so much more benefits from different stuff than my daughter, then it gets personal as well. So I had a university degrees, I had actually my kids, and then through that I just find my path. And when I got the chance to go over to the women's team in Häcken, it just felt like, yeah, of course I should do this. This is actually perfect for me, because I'm going to work with football. I have a chance to be with really high performance athletes. I have a chance to go abroad, and I can also speak out about bigger areas, and actually my voice can be heard in all over the world instead of in a classroom or through my friends when we had a dinner.
I love that inner drive, and I'm interested on that experience that you had within Sweden, becoming a football coach within the women's game. Did you always see that trajectory as a coach, that it would improve, and the fact that the industry is growing in that area? and you will be part of maybe something to inform practice going forward? Was that something in your mindset? And the reason I ask that is, again, previous female players that I've interviewed, they sometimes talk about that glass ceiling, that they didn't really necessarily have those role models. I'm just interested in a different way to you in terms of where you saw women's football going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. The main thing when I was in the men's football, having my journey, I was very keen on my planning for my career. So I was doing all these courses. I was starting in a grassroots team, basically. Then I went to academy with boys team and make sure I was getting the right education and everything. And then when I was ready for the professional level, I could pick and choose between senior men's team in the highest divisions in Sweden or being an assistant coach. So I actually picked to become an assistant coach because I wanted to make sure I had control over my career. So my playing career, I didn't have control over. Everybody had control over me and I couldn't handle it. So my biggest mission is to make sure I have control over my destiny. So when I pick and choose the career pathways, I will always try to reflect and speak to people and find my way. And when I was in Häcken as an assistant coach with the men's team, they took over Gothenburg FC, the women's team, the best women's team in Sweden, which was, I had some friends in that team and so on, but I didn't know so much about women's football. But when we brought that team to the same training ground, we built this, the pitches and everything, and they ended up in the same building as us. I kind of saw the big difference from what they got and what we had for the men's team. And I was on the men's side, but I tried to push, to make sure we started that journey. And when they asked me to take over the women's team there, I just realized I have this history of actually know what I have to do here. And I know this is something important to me. And then I just realized that, this is what I want to do because I know what to do here. I'm a man, but I want to improve the women's sports and I want to take that their side this time. And from that, I never went back. I'm just taking every fight I can. I just take everything I can speak about and try to push this because I feel like I have knowledge. I know the potential. I know what the future is going to look like. And then it's just a matter of time how quickly we can reach to that level. And Sweden is quite good in reality. England is starting and it's growing. And then you have a few countries that is really, really poor right now. But that's the journey, not being frustrated. Just keep educating people, keep pushing, keep working. And I think that's my main thing to make sure when I'm done, then it's like, okay, I did something bigger than just 4-3-3 and winning a game.
Yeah. How'd you keep that persistence and drive then, Robert, in terms of, the surrounding element of football? And there might be people that criticise women's football and you've got this passion and you see a growth and you see a trajectory and you want to keep giving back, like you said, rather than focusing on that technical and tactical aspect. How do you keep that persistence to keep pushing that boundaries and keep pushing women's football to enable it to grow? And obviously, in this case, the position you're in Sweden during that time, is there anything that sticks out on reflection of that period?
I mean, it's one thing I've learned the last few years is to never be upset or too upset with people or results or whatever. So I'm trying to make sure I stay calm. And so even if people are mooning on the social media or against me or whatever, I'm trying to stay calm and just discuss it and actually argument why this is the most important thing. And then when you look at the football, I'm of course having press conferences where I speak about football and the result, but I'm very keen on the longer perspective, and I think that actually helps me in the football as well. So of course I'm upset if we lose the game or whatever, but it's also I'm using that platform to make sure I have a personal agenda, and I want to make sure we use that agenda to improve women's sport. And I think a lot of people want to hear that. A lot of people want to be on that journey. So I just feel like I'm using every time I get the chance to speak well about it and make sure I also know what I'm speaking about. I just don't say the right words or whatever. I'm really, really keen on doing this. And I think people like people that speak with passion about the subject. So even if that's having this raising women's football, I think I've changed the mind of many friends, many people around me, because they see the progress I had in women's football and how much I love that. And I think that's how you inspire new people. And the next generation who comes to our games, for them, they will be normal. They come to our games with a lot of fans on the stadium, and my kids going to go to games and not reflect on this women's football or men's football. They're going to be there because they love football. And, never give up. Just keep going, and keep having this podcast, keep having the press conference, because it's the main thing for me. So I will never stop that.
Absolutely. And just on that then, so you mentioned the finances and everything that's kind of enabled women's football to grow over a recent period of time. What do you think the key differences are between the men and women then, in terms of maybe on the pitch and the way that you manage and lead? Is there anything that you think stands out in terms of differences? And obviously, from an economic point of view, because there's always that argument, but is there anything that you think has challenged you in terms of how you develop individuals in comparison to maybe the men's game?
I mean, first of all, when you just meet people, everybody's different. So if you're going to develop a boy or a girl, a man or a woman, it's kind of, who are you and how can I reach you and what do you need from me, right? So in that occasion, it's not a difference in that way. But if you look at the history of women's football and the men's football, and if you know that a little bit more and you know where they come from, some of the players on grassroots level, and if you know differences in strength, max speed, how far can you kick a ball, how much is pressure on you, how used are you to pressure, then it's a big difference, because the men's side has been in the centrum for many years. The women's side has been in the centrum for just a few years, and they just became professional, to be honest, and fans is just arriving to the stadium with full stadium, and the fans is also just pushing them and actually more pressure on them. So if you understand that, then it's a big difference. So everything is so much quicker for the girls who we're going to play now. So you need to also make sure that you slow it down and reflect on that, because if you push them too hard, they're going to have mental issues, they're going to have problems to perform, they're going to make sure they cannot be the best version of themselves. So I think that's the main thing, to know the history, to know how quickly they have become big fans on social media and, big salaries and a lot of pressure. So that thing helps me to make sure I reach out to them with my pedagogical skills and make sure I reach them where they are, their background. But that is good stuff to have in the men's side as well. But I didn't focus so much on it in the men's side. I do it with the women because I feel like it's really important. One obvious thing more is, if I generalize, is actually it's a lot more girls are educated. So they come from this semi-professional background. So they went to university as well. So they probably are 26, 27, and they have a degree in some way. And when you go to the university, you actually learn how to reflect, how to not buy everything, how you want to find answers. And if you know, when you speak to a group of people, I would say it's a big difference when you speak to a girls' team than a boys' team, those teams I've played with or worked with, because the girls will ask you more questions. They want to know more about why we do stuff and so on. And I think when you know that, then you also can prepare them with good answers or good reflections. While when I worked with the men's team, most of those were not educated in a way. Some of them didn't really go clear the school either. So they just bought into what you said, or they were more focusing on their own ego, to be honest. So that's something I've seen. I cannot say that it's all over the world, but the experience I have is that the women I play with or work with, they really want to know why, and they also want to push me, which is very fun. When the men's team more just want to know what to do, and then they try to do it.
So from a leadership and management point of view then, Robert, you mentioned earlier around controlling the controllables, but then you also said around, those pressures and expectations from fans and social media and all these different things that are around the game and the modern game today. So what would you do in terms of a leadership and management position to maybe mould and protect players in that sense if, these expectations and pressures is something that we cannot control? Is there anything that you do from a team point of view that supports that?
Yeah, I mean, as a coach, everybody have a game model, right? So you know what to do with all phases of the game and so on. And of course I have that, but I'm more and more actually not speaking so much about that. I actually speak about the environment I want to create and what's important for the group. So my leadership is built on 4 different words, basically. So the first one, when I started, was to be professional. I wanted to be that. I wanted to make sure everybody in my environment tried to be as professional as you can. And what does that mean? Yeah, but you try to do everything you can to be the best version of yourself. But then after a while, I realized that it's hard to be that if you don't have all the other stuff with that. So then I was added to be present. So for example, if you speak me, how can you handle pressure? How can you handle a full stadium at Wembley? And how can you handle a small stadium when it's not too many people if the opponent score a goal and so on? So I work a lot with work on being present here and now, listen to me or listen to you when we have a talk, blah, blah, blah. Then I'm adding yoga once a week. So I think, working with breathing, make sure you can actually stay connected to the present is very important. And I speak about that every day in a session, in a meeting, that you need to focus on what I'm saying right now because we need to stay here, right? And the third thing is to show passion. So, I mean, even if it's tough out there, even if it's tough business, right? You love what you're doing. Most of the footballers love that they play football. There's not too many footballers that I used to do this for a living. They actually do it because they have a passion for it. So I'm using that. And people who work in the environment as well, they love the sport. So if we can bring that attitude to the field, it's so much easier to handle failure because you feel like you love what you're doing and you want to keep going. The fourth thing is to be brave. So basically, I spoke about in the beginning, like men's, they just try to do what you say and they don't really care if they fail. Women, if I compare it, feel like they want to also do and understand. But if they fail, they feel like they let the rest of the team go and let down. So I feel like we work a lot with how can you be brave and lose the ball in some occasions or tell somebody that you need more of them without being scared that they're going to turn your back on you or not actually support you. So my environment is all about trust and being brave, but still have each other's backs, in the way you play, in the way you speak, and so on. So when we work with this, then we can work with the different styles, and we're going to play at City away at the big stadium this year, for example, or Arsenal, 60,000 at the Emirates. And so then we have this already in the IDP when we work with them, how we can develop them. Last year, we also signed a new sports psychologist full-time, so she's with us every day. She's a part of the IDP, so if the players need to work on body language, communication, how to handle this, we have an expert. I like it, I'm good at it, but I'm not an expert. So then I have a professional sports psychologist who can help me and help the players and help the staff. So we try to surround the players with good environment and good staff members so they can, handle all the pressure we have.
You mentioned that you like that element of the psychological aspect, and you mentioned yoga and being present. Is that something that's come about more recently in your journey, or have you always aligned these ideas before? I'm just interested on that process for you.
No, it's also recently, actually, because I was a really good player, but I was really bad when I was playing. I couldn't handle, and I was hard to listen to coaches when I was in a bad shape or bad self-confidence and so on. And people was trying to give me that, but I was too immature to handle, mental training or whatever. So it was when I started to work with another coach in the men's team of Häcken, this old Norwegian coach. He was all into mindfulness and yoga. And I had yoga before with coaches, but they just had it to stretch. And, we had some yoga, and I didn't really know what yoga was. We were there stretching an hour, that was done. But when you realize that if you use, breath work, mindfulness, how you can actually use that to recover, to make sure you can handle different scenarios. So we did that with the team, and I just loved it for myself. And I saw for the players, the men's players, that they also bought into it. And then when I went to the women's side, I added that, and I had a really good interview with the yoga instruction, talked about, I want the girls to be present and show passion and be brave. Can you make yoga about that? And they were like, yeah, this is all about yoga. So we kind of started to collaborate about that. And then when I went to Tottenham, the first thing I was doing was check, do we have any yoga instructor around? And then the men's team had one who worked individually with some of the players. And, it grew from there. And then she's a part of the team as well. And she worked with the same environment things I want, but she works with her skills. Not all players love it because they are like me when I was young. So it's fine, but they need to do it because I think it's a learning process for life. And I think that some things I will dictate because it won't harm them to be 1 hour sleeping on a bed, right? It's fine. So for me, it's a part of my career, and it's probably going to be even more because I'm so open to this. We're going to try mindfulness next week. We had a mental fitness workshop last year to visualize stuff as well. So I'm leaning more and more into this because you can obviously see how great athletes out there using this stuff, and I've tried it and I love it. So it's more like how you can make sure that players get it, use it, the time as well. But I'm very keen to develop that.
Love it. So if I ask you around your journey then, and we kind of touched upon Tottenham Hotspur so far, but how does one go from Sweden to London then? And in terms of maybe your development and taking yourself out your comfort zone and learning more and being a lifelong learner, what was that transition like for you, coming into a new country and implementing these things that you've mentioned from Sweden into a new football club?
I think one thing I would like to know before I moved was how you handle it for the family. I have twins, they are turning 14 now. My wife moving from her job. Culture change because England is not Sweden, I can promise you that. But you kind of just it's a little bit naive. I really just move and it's everything going to go well. And then I'm also going to work for this big club and everything. So what I learned the most this year was not about football or leading a team. It was actually to handle the adoption for my kids and my wife and finding the right way to live in London or work-life balance. Because most of the time at Tottenham Hotspur, I was very, it's football, it's still people, it's still the same environment for me. So it was quite easy to do that journey. Even if it was more staff members, it's high quality, it's more people, I was ready for that. But to handle 2 kids to move from Swedish school to English school with school uniforms, not speaking English so well, my wife going from a really good job in Sweden to not work in the beginning and try to find a job here, that was the biggest thing for me, to find a way to stay sharp at the work and still go home and be a very good husband and dad. And in the same time, take care of me, because I also moved. I'm also in a transition. So I think I put myself last. I put my family first. I put the team second. And put the team second was good enough because I could use the staff members in this amazing club. So it's actually helped me in my leadership. I'm there to delegate to my head of departments, to my senior leadership team, to make sure I become more of a manager than a head coach. And in that way, it actually was good for me, because then they grew. They like to work with me because I gave them the trust. I learned how to work with them, so I don't need to be a specialist in any area. I just need to make sure I guide the specialists in each area to work with the environment we have and the game model we have. So I had more time with the players. I could speak to the players, and I had more time with my kids and find the right decisions. And we moved in London to a Swedish community with a Swedish school, and then we kind of solved the issue for the kids, and then they started to enjoy London, and my wife got a job, and she started to really love London. So now we are actually in a really good spot. So learning process this year is everything, right? But mainly life experience, And when you learn like that, you also become a better person. When you become a better person, it's so much easier to reach the players. The new players will do the same stuff that I did. So I can use that when I speak to them, and I can speak about my journey to others and have it like a reflection, or, So I speak a lot with a lot of people because I like to speak openly about everything. That's the way I'm learning, instead of just keep it to myself. So I'm quite open with my issues, and that's my way to improve.
You kind of took the answer to the question that I was going to ask around, do you help players because of that experience? But one thing to maybe add a layer onto that point is, do you feel like that maybe these things are misplaced in terms of how you see football to be? Fans, media see it as glamorous, getting a football job, working at these fantastic institutions, these football clubs, but they don't necessarily think about or see that element that you've just touched upon in terms of relocating, understanding the cultural differences from Sweden to England, and relocating to London and everything else that's surrounding your family. Do you feel like that's missed a little bit?
100%. You're kind of focusing so much on the result because it's so much business in the football. So you kind of sometimes the holistic perspective about a player, a person, the whole life puzzle for that person. And then you have 25 players and 25 staff members that have the whole work-life balance. And to make that work, it's not only about the best tactics or high demands or whatever. It's actually about making them perform in the best way and get relations to do that. And I think watching the men's game exploding with money and high expectations is still people there as well. When I worked with the best men's players in Sweden, I used to realize when I started working with them that they are actually the same as the semi-professional. They are uneducated with some kind of ego, and they want to perform. If a coach treats them bad, they're going to feel bad self-confidence. They're going to be angry. If you reach them, they're going to play the best version of their football. So yeah, and sometimes I think you forget that in the tough world out there. And I think sometimes you just push for the best results, and then you might win. So then people say like, we're winning, so it's no problem. But I would say as soon as you start losing, then you're out. So if you want to have a consistent performance and environment where you develop, I think it's the best way is to make sure you have the holistic perspective and winning through that, even if it takes longer time, because then you can handle a bad season much better than if you need to buy 15 new players and just put a lot of pressure on them. So that's my belief. That I think that's my strength as a coach. That's why I like to work with Tottenham, because we look at it in the same way with the women's side. Organic movement. We're going to make sure we take step by step the environment to make sure we can handle the pressure that's races all the time. And we need to win though. nobody will have me here for 10 years and we just have a progress and we never win. So I need to find ways to win. But look, the first year we already reached Wembley. We already won against one of the top teams as well. So I think it's doable. I have a strong belief that this is the right way, especially women's football that haven't been broken like the men's team, men's football in one way, because there's so much money in the men's football right now. So the women's football is still potential that you can find new ways instead of just following in the men's way, basically.
So how do you define success then in maybe your current role or even going forward? And I don't want to kind of ask you the kind of the cliche question of, you know, are you going to win the league or are you going to win the FA Cup, etc. But more importantly, from your perspective, because everything you've just spoke about is that intrinsic drive.
Yeah.
I think it's important to relate that to what you've said, because you said results driven and you get all this external pressure. So if we kind of merge that, how do you define success in your current role then? What is there anything that you define important to you?
So the thing is with success, it's like, when you look at it in one way, yes, titles and result is one thing, but that's not for me more than I want it for the club, for the players, for the fans. That's not the main thing for me. So I look at it like a self-determination theory. Like, I want to have an environment where the players come in, they have everything they need to be the best version of themselves so they can perform, develop, and make sure they feel happiness and they play. And I think through that, we're going to win. And if we don't win now, we're going to reach closer and closer to winning. But when a player leave here, when they grow older, I want them to speak about these years in Tottenham. When we played there, it was the best years of my career because everything was so good. And I had this opportunity to compete and actually be happy. And it's not about, I had the best coach that was Robert. I kind of don't want them to say that. I kind of want them to speak about the environment instead of me. Then I know that I'm a good spot because I'm responsible for the environment, but they are creating the environment. So I need to make sure they can create that environment I want. And then, you know, it's like when you give gifts to your friends or kids, it's more fun to give to somebody and get the gift, I would say. And I want to do the same here. So success for me is to see all the players stick together, work really hard, you know, fight for success, fight for titles, but you don't need to win the titles. You should do it together and you should feel that the group thing that tries to take you there, then it makes me feel like I'm successful. On the other hand, I don't have any good titles yet, so I need to win those titles to make sure I don't just sit there and speak like, what is he talking about? But for me, it's more important to create that, and I know the titles will come, but I'm more pleased to create that environment than giving a title and everybody hates me.
Yeah, the score will take care of itself if you get the environment right. Is that what you kind of saying?
Correct.
How do you keep up to date with maybe current trends then? So we mentioned, you know, the women's football's developing and there's different types of tactics and different management and leadership styles that are being emerged from, you know, the game in general. What do you do to maybe implement certain things and learn off different types of individuals to add that within what you're trying to create in terms of that environment?
I mean, and using the network I have. So if you look tactics and everything, it's a really cool club because we work with one club. We have an identity of how we want to play. So I have a meeting once a month or so with Ange, so I can speak about his tactics with the men's team. What's is he struggling with now? What's his main focus? So then I get really good discussions with him, and then I can be inspired by him, right? Other coaches that I speak and meet, of course. We look for trends, so we look for them. You know, the Olympics, the World Cup last year. How is the goal scored? How is the set pieces delivered now? Can we pick something from that? Can we change something for that? I speak to some of the national team coaches, how they do in different areas, because I feel like some parts of it, they do really good stuff. And then I have a good network with coaches. So I'm trying to be quite open to share stuff with other stuff, because I feel like I'm not stealing stuff. We're actually sharing ideas, and then you kind of don't steal it. You kind of add it to your knowledge, and then you can use it in a certain way. So that's my way to try to always do that. And then in leadership, I'm very keen on leadership developments. I have a mental advisor I had in Häcken. I still speak to her once in a while about my leadership. She knows me well. So like self-determination theory, we go through what's the steps in that, how do you create that, like actually it's a model for that, and I can use that to make sure my leadership is connected to how I think, but it's actually connected to a theory, then it's actually easier. So I'm not reading from the theory, I'm doing my things, but it's connected to a theory, and then it's so much easier to sell it into the players, to be honest. So, I always try to listen to podcasts, listen to people, read books. But also, I'm very like, my life experience is taking me here. So I'm very also like, trust myself. So I don't really want to bring too much new stuff. I just want to make sure we get better in what we're doing. So this year we don't sign more than 3 players to the squad. I'm not adding too much new stuff because I feel like the potential is when you go deep into what you already have. So I want to develop the players we have, the staff members we have, the game model we have, and it's not going to be a lot of new stuff. It's going to be just how can we improve this? And I think that's when you get that environment you want to create. It's, of course, you bring a few new staff members and players, but the majority of everything is still there to make sure we can go deeper into it instead of just find new trends.
You mentioned your relationship with Postecoglou then. Is that normal for, I know obviously you've got that one experience, but is that normal for that transparency as a football club as a whole to learn and develop a community practice from, academy to first team to women's team? I'm just interested on that concept of building that community practice to improve you.
I don't think it's normal. I'm not really sure, but I had it in Häcken before as well. But that was a little bit easier because I worked as an assistant coach for the men's coach. And then when I went over to the women's side, he was my friend. So it was easier to have these talks. But I like that talk. So when I came here, I of course, tried to make it happen. And Ange is a very friendly guy. So he was keen on actually do that. So I'm very happy that he wanted to do that. I think it's also good for the club because then we basically are one club. He plays his style, my style, but it's very connected to the Tottenham style. So I cannot say how many other coaches do that in the other clubs, but I think it's quite unique, and I think it's something that should do more in other clubs because I feel like in-house exchange is quite good, and I think we forget that sometimes. We have so many good staff members, the academy, the men's side, the women's side, but it's kind of different departments where you shouldn't involve each other. But I think, like, why not? You have so many competent people.
You mentioned adding 3 players to your team, and if I kind of flip the question I asked previously in terms of embedding them into the team that you've got now and trying to be successful in terms of that intrinsic layout that we've kind of, which eludes us within football, what are your ambitions and aims going into the new season?
I mean, obviously, it's always to develop, which is the easy question. And then, okay, where were we in the table? We were number 6. Okay, it should be nice to improve that. How many points did we get? It should be nice to get more points. But on the other hand, that results are secondary for me, but it's quite important for the club. The main thing for me is to make sure we create more players that can, compete at a high level. I want to create more national team players. I want to make sure we have a few young players coming through to reach the line. As we already had a few last year, so I want to improve that so we make sure that we show the world that if you play in Tottenham, you win games, you compete for the titles, but you also have a self development where you actually reach the national teams, and we are focusing on the individual as well. So that's success for me in this year as well, to make sure we improve that, and also for the staff members to make sure they feel like they improve and get more responsibilities and everything. Then you want to win, but it's also when you look at the opponent, they invest a lot of money, signing a lot of players, and we do another thing like, okay, we look for 3 key players that's connected to how we play, what kind of character are they, because we need to find a good player, but also the right characters that we need to this group of people. So the interviews with those players is very important to see if they have the right mindset, the right leadership and everything. So we are very much looking more clearly on exactly who we want as a player and as a person. And through that, I think we can have a really good journey this year and make sure we can compete. But also, if it doesn't go the first year, I'm quite sure that we have a good ground to build the third year to make sure we go for the top 3 and the next signings, because you always need to sign a few players. But what we need right now is actually to give trust to the players we have. Otherwise, they're just going to feel like we're removing the players all the time. We had a quite big rotation of squad last season, and I'm not that kind of coach, but my first year I needed to do that because I needed players that can handle the way we're going to play and so on. So we needed to do it last year, but now I don't want to do it the second year because I want to build trust in the group so they feel like they can reach the group we want.
How do you learn off maybe the cup run that you had then last year? So you mentioned that element of rotation of players and maybe embedding your way in the first year, and then obviously being in that cup final. How do you reflect upon that and obviously use that as a benchmark going forward?
I mean, I think when you come as a coach, you have a strong belief what you're going to do, and you think, okay, I'm good, I'm going to make everybody buy into this. But if you lose too much, if you don't have this success, you're probably going to have players who start thinking like, is he really speaking the right stuff? Is he actually for real? So you need some kind of success through the leadership I have. Otherwise, they're not going to buy into everything I say. I still have a strong belief what I'm doing, but you kind of need result as well to make sure they buy into it quicker. And some hard decisions, if you don't play, or if you play just a few minutes, it's easier if you win. If you lose and you still want to focus on this play that you're going to give trust, you're going to create a bad discussion with those players. So you need results. You need players that perform when you give them the trust. Otherwise, it's very hard to stay with that trust for the player that you feel is right for you. So the league was up and down. We had a good streak in the beginning. We had some really bad games before Christmas, but then we came back and beating Arsenal for the first time. So that was a really important win because we had some tough games before that. Then we had the Christmas break, and then we actually signed 6 new players and removed 6 players. And then went into restart, and then it took a while again before we were excellent. But we had this cup streak all the time that was with us, and we didn't perform really well. We didn't play like amazing football, but we find ways to win. And sometimes it was the sub playing coming in and scoring goals in the late part of the game, and then you build a strong group because they feel like they are part of it as well. So that was actually good for the team spirit. And when everybody came to Wembley, and even if we are smashed that final, we still reached Wembley, and it's actually a big performance to reach that stage. And now we know how it is. So next time we're probably going to have a bigger chance to win because now we have experienced the environment, which was amazing, but also very different to other games.
You mentioned resources, and you kind of related that to other football clubs. Obviously, during the last couple of weeks or even the last few days, there's been a new ownership model in terms of the YSL. Does that impact you at all in terms of resources and materials to improve? I'm just interested on the whole league and how that impacts potential change from a footballing manager point of view.
I mean, I don't think you will look at it and see so much difference the first year, but I think we have created something that gives us more potential to raise the women's football and to give more money into the business. And I think when you see that, I also think most of the clubs are ready to invest even more money into the clubs. And if that happens, we're probably going to have a better organization around the TV and make sure we have a good product when we show the games. And perhaps more games will be on the big stadiums, which will be a better product as well. So then I think this is the first step to make sure we have some ownership in that and that you can actually start. I mean, I see women's football as a startup, and I see it like you need to invest a lot of money into it before you can get a benefit. And I think most of the startup is like that. But when you see the potential, and when you see that people want to invest, and when you see people want to come to the games, and when you sponsors want to be on your shirts now. So I think this is a good step to make sure we do something different, because we shouldn't copy the men's side. We should do women's football and women's sport in their own way. And I think that's a way to do it. And hopefully these good people that work with this have a good plan for it. I'm not really keen on all the details. I know what they are doing and why we do it. And I think it's the right way to go. And then I'm going to work from my end to make sure I push the club up. I push everybody I can to make sure we improve and invest more money into it.
Crystal Palace, obviously the first game. Are you excited for that?
Very much, very much. I think last year we had Chelsea away. It was also like, okay, probably the toughest game you can have. This year is a new team to the league at home, but they have invested in some really good players. They are a strong team, so it's going to be very interesting to see what they can do. But yeah, we are very much looking forward to that, and hopefully start the journey on a better second year.
So final part then, Robert, I always ask my guests maybe what your ambitions and what the future holds for you. Obviously, you mentioned being present in the present moment, and it's hard to predict what future outcomes might look like. But is there anything that you've got your heart set on, obviously at Spurs, but maybe just in the long run, is there anything you aim to want to achieve within the game? Or even, it might not necessarily be in the game, it might be you developing yourself as a person. I'm just interested on what your aims and objectives are going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much more to do here. So I'm kind of, I signed a new 3-year contract with Tottenham because I feel like it's a lot going on, and I want to make sure we can do everything I'm planning for, and that's going to take time. But of course, in the long end, I see the whole world out there, and I think women's football now in the US and in England is really good, and some other countries is starting to grow. and I'm always here and now, but I also see the potential to work all over the world in the future and make sure I help women's football and sport to grow as it should be. And on the other hand, you never know what comes up. You know, if you asked me 4 years ago, I would probably not say that I'm going to work with women's football. So who knows, in 2 years, perhaps I'm working with businesses or whatever. I don't know that, because I'm actually quite open to listen to stuff. But I really enjoy where I am. I really know what I'm doing, and I feel like I get a lot of energy from what I'm doing. So here and now is very good, and I see myself here for a few more years. But then I'm very open to new stuff and new countries. I like to travel, so I'm probably not going to be in the UK for 30 more years. But I'm looking into Tottenham with a huge potential, and obviously it's going to be a few years before we reach that. So I'm very happy where I am.
No, I think the weather helps, does it, Robert, in terms of long term being in the UK?
I mean, it's like one of those things. You move from Sweden to England, you don't really get weather, right? So you cannot get everything in life. So you just need to go and travel sometimes when you want the beach.
Absolutely. Robert, I just want to say thank you for being so elegant, being so open. I think the element of mindset and that importance of leadership there is very important. So obviously your values, and I think it's reassuring to hear that from a football coach and a management perspective. I just want to wish you all the best going forward at Crystal Palace. Good luck with your yoga as well. Hopefully that continues. And I wish you well in your future endeavours, whether that's at Spurs or in the future as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed speaking to you.